Oh, look, Kristen's here. We roll called without you.
You did. Shame on you.
And then, yeah, Matt and Bijou has Matt's name.
Oh, Matt's Matt on mine.
Matt's on mine.
Bijou has Matt's name.
Really?
I'm Matt from up here.
Yes, she is.
I'm just saying, she has Matt's name.
I have his name because he sent me the invite. Should I look?
Oh, now, now that you talked, it says Bijou.
Oh,
Stand up.
And would the real Maggie White please stand up?
Maggie, say hello.
Even though it says
You're muted.
So let's go with, I'll report out from closed session in regards to item 2A.
I can't hear John.
Hit your volume.
I have it up. I hear everybody else.
John is muted.
You're muted, John. Yeah,
I mute myself.
there you go.
I didn't do that. I didn't do that.
Way to go, Maggie.
Thank you. Okay, so as far as reporting for a closed session, item 2A, conference with labor negotiators regarding CSEA. Information was shared in regards to the MOU. And item 2B, conference with labor negotiators regarding SMEA. Information was shared. We'll go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody unplug your earplugs. Mrs. Flores? You guys have the pledge.
Sure. Stand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Amen.
Oh, good. Mrs. Herrick moved. I was worried about her. Making sure she was frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're back. Public comment. There are no public comments. Oh, item C. Oh, calendar. Yes. And Mr. Ontiveros, in regards to the calendar, you had an addition to make?
I do have an addition to make regarding the calendar. One of the requirements that came out with the cancellation of the adoption of the LCAP back in June was the adoption of the LCFF attendance and learning continuity plan that has to be adopted by the board by September 30th. What it also requires is a public hearing, just like the LCAP did. So we only have one meeting scheduled in September right now for September 9th. The public hearing has to be on a date separate from the date that the continuity plan is adopted. So I'd like to get consensus on scheduling a meeting for September 23rd for the purposes of bringing forth that attendance and continuity plan. That's a requirement, has to be approved by September. It addresses issues how you're going to provide instruction, the things that we're working on right now. According to the health guidance, distance learning, how are you going to engage stakeholders? And we have done the survey, so we collected that data in the development of our. It memorializes the process for 2021, descriptions of how we're going to address gaps in learning, how we're going to conduct stakeholder engagement during the year, particularly if the pandemic continues, how we're going to address the needs of our unduplicated pupils, students with unique needs, homeless students, and providing access to devices. All those are required to be submitted to the board by the 30th, submitted to the county board, who then approves the continuity plan and forwards to the state, just as with the LCAP. So we need a second meeting in September. So I'd like to add that meeting on the 23rd.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the second meeting for September 23rd, 2020.
Second. Aye.
Mr. Larson?
I had to unmute.
Aye.
Yes, that would help, huh? Mrs. Oliver is not here. Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead.
Aye. Okay, so the additions made, we'll meet same bat place, same bat time,
Yes.
9:23:20.
And we lost Mrs. Oliver. I have emailed the support technician at Merrill Gardens to try and get her back.
Okay. Okay, and so the remainder of the upcoming calendar would be first day of school on August 13th and the September 9th, 2020 regular board meeting. And as stated before, there is no public comment this evening on either agenda or non-agenda items. So we'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
I will move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll-
I second.
Moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mrs. Flores to approve the agenda as presented. Well, let's do roll call. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Laura,
Aye.
Mrs. Oliver, Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead.
Aye. Agenda is approved as presented and consent agenda. I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Lara. All in favor, roll call.
Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Laura,
Aye.
Mrs. Oliver, Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead.
Aye. Moving on to action items. Item 7A, review and approval of board bylaw BB 9270, conflict of interest.
So I'm gonna provide an overview of items A and B together. Excuse me, because this is a biennial requirement by the state that we review and remind ourselves of Board Bylaw 9270, the conflict of interest. It's required by the government code, and any agents of the school district are required to disclose any potential conflict of interest, and we all do it through the Form 700 form that's filed annually. And so item A is just a review of Board Bylaw 9270. It's there for as part of the agenda that the board received. And so this item is just the acknowledgement that we have reviewed and approved the board bylaw as exists. There are no changes to it. This is just that biennial requirement. We do it every 2 years. And then I'll address the next issue on the exhibit that goes with item 7.
Okay. Anybody have a motion? Feel good about it? I know I love filling out the Form 700.
Yeah.
In item B, I did take note that there were changes in titles of
And I'll go
various
through
people.
B first. I'll go
Yeah,
through
we're just
B
going to vote on
and
A.
first.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
vote on A first and then move along to B.
Sorry.
I'll make the recommendation that the Board of Education acknowledge, review, and approve Board Bylaw BB 9270, conflict of interest as presented.
I second.
Moved by Mr. Lara, seconded by Mrs. Flores, that the board acknowledge, review, and approve board bylaw BB 9270, conflict of interest as presented. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Laura,
Aye.
Mrs. Oliver, Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to B.
And then so this takes us to B, which is your point, Linda. The exhibit is the requirement that along with the board bylaw, that there is a listing of who are those individuals that are that fall under the effective 9270. And as we have done the redesign over the last 2 years, because we, again, the last time we took this was 2018, there have been a number of changes. So I want to thank Kristen because she did all the work on this. to go through and compare what we had in place 2 years ago to what we have now. And so what you see is those that are in red and underlined are new job titles. Those that are struck through are those that have been eliminated or, and in most cases, subsumed or replaced by one of the new job titles as well.
Right.
And so these are the actual individuals that are required to file the Form 700 that the board bylaw 9270 stipulates. So you're right, in 2 years, there's a lot of differentiation in verbiage of who's in those roles and what those roles are. And kudos to Kristen for figuring it all out.
I like the black and the red. Very helpful.
Yes.
Any discussion or questions?
I'll move that the Board of Education review and approve Board Bylaw Exhibit 9270, Conflict of Interest, as presented.
I'll second.
Been moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mr. Laura, that the Board of Education review and approve bylaw exhibit 9270, conflict of interest as presented. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Laura?
Aye.
Mrs. Oliver? Mrs. Cordero? Aye. Mr. Hollenshead?
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to 7C, consolidated application for funding categorical aid programs and local control accountability plan federal addendum. Mrs. Dutra. Is that you?
I'm struggling to hear. I can't hear anything.
Are you muted?
7C, the consolidated.
Uh-oh.
We're on that.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Brian's.
I apologize. We're struggling just a little bit hearing. Rebecca Herrick, our Director of Plan Alignment, will be presenting tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Dutra. Good evening, board members, Mr. Ontiveros, cabinet members. I want to thank the Plan Alignment team for their work on the consolidated application and federal addendum. I want to thank Coordinator Johanna Chase for the work, all the work that she has done on both projects. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
You're good? Okay. Thank you. I wanted to point out the California Department of Education has updated their logo. Did everyone see that come in? I'll show you again. Do you see their new logo, which is quite appropriate for now?
Yeah, I know. I was like, that's a really crummy drawing of an ocean. But yeah, that's it.
Oh, that was really creative. Anyway, this evening I'm going to share with you the consolidated application that we will refer to as the CONAP and the update of the LCAP federal addendum. Following our review and your approval, we will be continuing our work on the learning continuity and attendance plan. We will continue our work on the LCAP budget overview for parents, our work on the LCAP plan, and then finally, the COVID-19 relief allocations will be reviewed by Mr. King again this evening. They are in alignment with the learning continuity and attendance plan that Mr. Ontiveros talked about earlier. The learning loss mitigation dollars have increased from Mr. King's last board presentation. He will review the new amount with you this evening. ESSA requires the LEA to complete a district plan, which is the LCAP plan. The LCAP plan includes the goals, actions, and resources to improve student achievement. The LCAP addendum is the federal plan that is alignment with the goals, actions, and resources within the LCAP. Our LCAP stakeholders, our team, have collaborated on the work to include some of the changes that I'm presenting this evening in the LCAP federal addendum. A lot of work has been done prior to March. The CONAP is used by the state as the application for the districts to fill out, followed by the distribution of categorical funds from various federal programs to school districts. So this is a example of what it looks like. The federal requirements for all public school districts is to include a plan that outlines the U.S. Department of Education's funding and how we'll support student success. In California, we have the LCAP federal addendum, the LCAP, the CONOP, and the SIPSA plans. For 2020-21, due to COVID-19, although some funding timelines have been adjusted, the use of the fund requirements under each of these federally funded supports still exist. So you could see the adjustments. The CONAP was released July 6th and it's due on August 17th. So we're going to be receiving funds for Title I, Part A, improving basic programs, Title I, Part A, supporting effective instruction, Title II, Part A, supporting effective instruction, Title III, Part A, language instruction for English learners and immigrant students, and Title IV, Part A, student support and academic enrichment grants. We also received Title I-C funds for our migrant education program, but they are not included in the CONAP. It's a separate allocation that is an application that's already been approved. So I'm going to review the title funds at this time. So Title I supports all students in reaching proficiency on challenging state academic standards and assessments. All schools in Santa Maria Bonita School District are Title I school programs, which allow us to support all students through research-based supplemental support services, programs, and strategies. These services can include support for student success, parent education, and professional learning. Title II supports students by improving teacher and administrator quality through professional learning. These include strategies and resources to build capacity and support our goal of having all students move one grade level each year. Title III supports English learners, and Title IV supports a well-rounded education for students. CDE applies a funding formula based upon annual census data, the number of identified English learner students, and the annual allocation the state receives from the U.S. Department of Education to guide the allocations to each school system. This is a projected allocation. Following Congress's approval of the funding in October, we will have a second installment. For 2020-21, our initial allocation is consistent with 2019-2020 allocation. So for Title I, the intent of Title I, again, is for school-wide programs, is to support all students. The following adjustments were made. Supporting our district goal of having one preschool at every site in the next 3 years. So this year we're adding Libin and Liberty, and we're providing Title I preschool programs at both of those schools. And for our preschools, we do have a total of 11 preschool programs. That's how many we'll have this year. The second adjustment under Title I is that we needed to add Bill Libin Elementary School. It will also be a school-wide program. For Title II, supports all students by improving teaching and administrator quality through professional learning. All schools are provided support, and there's a continuous focus on schools that are ATSI or CSI status. You will see that El Camino has exited ATSI status. Fessler, Oakley, and Bruce are in ATSI status. And then due to COVID-19, Fessler will close out CSI funding in September 2020. As a note, Fessler did exit CSI status, but they did go into ATSI status due to their special education student group being below standard.
Rebecca, tell me what ATS status is again, so I will remember.
Additional targeted school-wide support.
Okay, and they exited it, right? El Camino did?
Yes. What happened, El Camino exited it, the status, and then Fessler did exit CSI, but they fell into ATSI.
Okay,
As a reminder, ATSI is due to student groups and CSI is school-wide.
okay, thank you. I just had to get it back in there again.
Yeah, it's been a while. Okay. So for Title III, this focuses on supporting English learners. The adjustments were made based upon feedback from DLAC. They wanted to streamline the parent education program with a stronger focus on supporting the needs of English learners and our newcomer parents. It's of English learner and newcomer students. They wanted more of the parent education for those parents that had English learners and newcomer students. DLAC requested a greater focus on improving classroom instruction and strengthening connections between teachers and parents. The second adjustment that was made is that the ELD coaches that were in the LCAP were moved to the LCAP addendum. This is a better alignment in order to reach our vision of student success. So the ELD coaches were moved over in order to align the plans. In addition, we anticipate 582 students who qualify as newcomers based upon their arrival to the United States. Materials will be provided based on student need. Title IV focuses on student support and enrichment grants. Adjustments that have been made are based on feedback from our LCAP stakeholders. This includes providing digital libraries, which are highly supported by stakeholders in support of a well-rounded education and also now in support of distance learning, and an increased parent education by providing a district-wide focus on social emotional learning and the whole child approach. Our focus is always on program quality that is built on the foundation of compliance. So our next steps are approval of the CONAP, which we hope happens this evening. And then we have our stakeholder collaboration and work on the AB 77 learning continuity and attendance plan. We're involving our LCAP stakeholders through our LCAP meetings, DLAC meetings, stakeholder surveys to include all community members, our parent leadership team meetings, and then our school plan for school student achievement to include school site title allocations. As Mr. Ontivero shared, we will be having a public hearing and school board meetings for the learning continuity plan and attendance. So what questions might you have?
Where did the Con app come from?
So the CONAP is actually an application that we use to apply for the federal funds.
So it is an app.
Yes. And
Okay.
I also have Johanna Chase in here too. So if we have questions, it's an application to apply for the funds and she actually enters it into the computer.
Okay.
So is she going to answer, is she going to answer more of your question, Vita? Rebecca, is she going to come on right now or you're masking up?
Yeah, she can come on right now. We're in here together. So
Yeah, that's why. Yes, I just, just didn't want to start asking other questions if she was going to start to talk to us.
So the consolidated application came about almost 20 years ago when the state decided to pull all together the federal funds into one device. And so throughout California, what we do is we use this consolidated application process to work with our local school boards and say, here's how we in our district, Santa Maria Bonita, will best utilize our federal funds, which we've just presented to you.
Mhm.
And then we submit the information into the database up to the state. So in order for us to receive our federal funds, we have to enter it into that database. And so the term consolidated application just goes back about 20 years because the intent was just to streamline for all of the districts in our state, how we all work together to be able to support the utilization of these federal funds.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Mrs. Herrick, can you go back to the Title 1, 2, 3, actually Title 3? Perfect, thank you. So one of the questions I always have is regarding the parent education aspect of this. I know because we get asked that every year about more education for parents. That's a pretty prevalent thing, but we also have these parents that are sharing students with Hancock and with the high school district. So are there, I can't recall from the past, but are there things that we do with those districts to kind of coordinate that or share that goal?
Yes, we do coordinate with the high school district. I know we have a lot of similar classes, and we've been working on that to coordinate kind of what's being taught. So it goes from, you know, from the elementary to the junior high up into the high school. A lot of the parents are involved at all three levels. Dr. Castillo-Schiffer is working further on that. And that definitely is one of our goals. And it will be, you know, it's going to be a little bit different with the parent education they need to support distance learning as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of always been one of the things in the past is trying to find what's, you know, part of the reason that parents want that is because they want to be able to help their kids or be there for their kids. And so it's trying to find what's most effective to achieve that goal for them. And I think it's great if we can articulate what those families that have kids in both districts and use those resources that the high school district has too, time-wise even.
And as Ms. Herrick said, Ms. Castillo-Schiffer has a pretty comprehensive and aggressive plan to really go after that this year. Part of the changing of how our departments are was to really get that team in place so that she could really have a large, strong group just focused on how do we support our parents in a different way, not just around parent education, but also in communication and more of those feedback loops as well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the way that it looks without having, and you could see that in some of the strike-throughs and the positions, without having just separate island that's migrant, and then having our trying to do other things ELD-wise. I mean, I think that for me, that's the thing that's really nice to see is that we're getting a little bit more streamlined, and then hopefully that makes that communication part more effective. Just want to make sure we got as many partners as we can have. I think, you know, even, you know, Hancock is a good one as well. Anybody else have questions?
I have one question about soliciting input. Is the learning and continuity plan that is going to come to us in about a month going to be based on what had already been done before COVID in terms of stakeholder meetings and that sort of thing? Or is there something planned for the next couple of weeks, say?
Yes, Mrs. Cordero, we will be sending the invitation out. We have the same stakeholder meetings planned for the year, and that LCAP stakeholder team will work on the learning continuity and attendance plan. We'll work in collaboration on that. There's a lot of pieces to that. It is very involved, and the guidelines really show that we do need to involve all stakeholders. As you know, I think we mentioned last meeting, but if you don't know, Dr. Castillo-Schiffer too, she has sent out several surveys that went into the planning for our reentry plan. Those surveys will continue, and that is also part of our stakeholder engagement but it definitely will continue. We do have our same stakeholders involved. We contacted the parents. Dr. Castillo Schiffer had a meeting last week where she really worked with the DLAC members and also the parent leadership team. Those members that do go to the stakeholder LCAP meetings. And she kind of had a meeting to kind of talk about what it will look like this year and how they will continue to be involved. And so a lot of our board members have been to those meetings. You know, we've built a lot of capacity. There's a lot of collaboration and engagement, and we'll continue that process, and we'll just be working on a different plan. And then the learning continuity and attendance plan, there's a lot that aligns with the funds that Mr. King will be talking about later, the COVID-19 relief funds. So that will be one of the first things for me to kind of outline the plan of what is expected, and then to review how those funds are aligned with the plan.
And the plan is in full alignment with all the work we've been doing all
Right.
year. Ms. Herrick is working step by step with our departments to ensure that none of the work stops. It all continues moving forward.
And so, Rebecca, there's still then DLAC and site council meetings for the different schools as
Correct.
well?
Yes, that's correct. So we will have those DLAC and ELAC meetings, and they will be, you know, on finding out the same information. One concern or one challenge, there's always a challenge, right, with COVID, is the timeline. So the board meeting that was added this evening is September 23rd. And remember, we'll be working with the county on this plan. And so the rough draft and everything will need to be ready at least 2 weeks prior. We do have some support from the county on this, but it is a very quick timeline, and we are up for the challenge. And I know the stakeholders are as well.
No, and the reason I asked is because I remember being on a site council, just, you know, not every school gets a site council or a DLAC group together, you know, certainly right off the bat, and definitely not right now, probably. So I just was curious if that was still a part of the process or part of the group.
It definitely is. And
Awesome.
Ms. Chase, part of her work is really working with DLAC and getting the communication back to the ELAC, and she's done a really exceptional job of that.
Nice.
So she is working with DLAC as well. We have our second meeting with DLAC this next week, and we'll continue to build their capacity so that they're able to take this information back to the sites. Dr. Castillo Schiffer also always provides paper information to be taken back. I'm not sure how we'll work that this time, but we'll continue that same way of communicating between the LCAP stakeholder meetings and the school site teams.
So are you doing the meetings by Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
And
I just want to reiterate around that attendance and continuity plan. It's not the plan. It's how are you addressing specific issues?
Right.
And to reinforce Ms. Dutra's point, we're going forward with all the planning that we've had in place, right? Because it's that all about teaching and learning for kids. And so it's addressing those issues that are really specific to the environment we're in. And so the reentry plan addresses a lot of those issues.
Yeah, we just pull those out and
it's
tack them in,
so
basically.
again, I want to reinforce, it's not just what's the plan for this, it's
Right.
how are you making sure you're staying on point with your plan?
Right.
And that's really our focus. So it's a rush. The template was just released August 1st, and what is today, the 12th?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, you got to have it adopted by September 30th. We'll be bringing the LCAP back in December, and I don't see Ms. Herrick on my screen anymore, but I think that's still the timeline for the actual LCAP update.
Yes.
And the budget pieces, you know, to keep just to kind of build a bridge to get back onto the regular cycle.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Ontiveros. So the LCAP, remember, is in the next 3-year plan for 2021 through 24. We still will bring that back into the cycle, and that goes to the school board in June and is due to the county by July 1st. So all the work we're doing really is going to align between both plans. One thing that's really important about the learning continuity and attendance plan, it really is about the reentry plan and then how we're doing now and how we plan to continue to do throughout into as long as we need to go through the different phases, but what that looks like. And it also involves the operations side. So we've been working with, maintenance and operations and food service and continuing to look at their needs for our students and to keep updating our plans.
Thank you, Mrs. Herrick and Ms. Chase and team who've done meticulous, detailed work on this. So we really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a really nice earring you have, Mrs. Herrick.
I have two, but thank you
Really,
very much.
yeah, super good.
I have a really good mask to wear for the meeting in September.
Okay,
I'm
it
gonna
just
surprise
just so you know,
Mhm.
everybody, one of Mrs.
Oh.
Herrick's young proteges is now a second grade teacher at our new school. In fact, one of her proteges that she had for second grade
Correct.
is now a second grade teacher at Miliband. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know she was teaching second grade. I knew she was teaching kindergarten last year. I was a little bit surprised when I walked into her classroom, but very pleasantly surprised.
Yes, she's inspired by you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody? You got anybody want to make a motion? Anyone? Bueller?
I would move to authorize the superintendent to submit the 2020, 2021.
I can't hear you, Leslie.
Okay, I'm going to start over.
Oh, sure.
I move that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to submit the 2020-2021 consolidated application for funding categorical aid programs and local control accountability plan federal addendum to the California Department of Education as presented.
I second.
Moved by Mrs. Cordero and seconded by Mrs. Flores. The board authorizes superintendent to submit the 2020-2021 consolidated application for funding categorical aid programs and local control accountability plan federal addendum to the California Department of Education as presented. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara,
Aye.
Mrs. Oliver, Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mr. Hollinshead.
Aye, motion passes. Moving on to discussion, item 8A, review of budget revisions.
Oops, I'm muted. Moving on to 8A, review of budget revision as a result of the newly passed state budget. My guess is Mr. King is here.
Yes, good evening. Well, I'll be reviewing the 45-day budget revision, and we need to do this as a result of Ed Code, which states that no later than 45 days after the governor signs the annual budget act, the school district must make available to the public the changes and revisions to our revenue and expenditures as a result of the budget act passing. So that's what we're doing this evening. The governor signed the 2021 budget on June 29th. 45-day timeline ends August 13th. And we had the 45-day budget revision available for public review in the business office on August 4th. Predictions for recovery. So this slide comes directly from School Services of California. It predicts when the economy will recover, and it looks at gross domestic product, so GDP. And just as a reminder, GDP is a monetary value of all goods and services made in the country during a specific time. So the U.S. always tracks this. And what the graph basically shows us is that by the end of 2022, early 2023, we'll be back at our 2019 GDP levels. And given the current recession was not induced by dysfunction of any economic driver, the recovery will largely depend on the trajectory of the coronavirus itself. So just wanted to bring this. I thought this was a very good informational slide from school services, so I wanted to bring it to the board. So the state budget that was passed, there were some changes. And so on the revenue side, and regarding LCFF, it did restore the 7.92% reduction to the LCFF base grant, and then it did set COLA at 0. So what that did is it increased our revenue. It increased our base grant by $11.6 million. It increased our supplemental concentration grant dollars by $2.9 million. On the special ed side, there was an increase in per ADA funding, and the result for Santa Maria Bonita is an increase of almost $1.1 million in revenue. The lottery projections, they did go down. Unrestricted went down by 51,000, restricted by 85,000. And with ACEs in preschool, there was 10 to 15% cuts, but now those are restored to the existing 1920 levels, so flat funding. So on the ACEs, they get back that those 339,000, and then the preschool revenue gets back that 218,000. So the COVID-19 relief dollars. So at our last board meeting, a slide that outlined it all, we're going to be receiving $24.2 million in COVID-19 relief dollars. The breakdown of that is about 285 from the state that we received last fiscal year. That is no timeline to spend those dollars. Also the federal CARES ESSER dollars, which was 3.38 million, we will be receiving this year. And that's a timeline to spend as of September 30th, 2022. But I want to concentrate now on the federal CARES learning loss mitigation funds, because this is the biggest pot of dollars. And it's based on 3 criteria. So we receive funding based on students with disabilities. We'll get about $3 million. Also based on our ADA, 2.8 million. And then we'll receive funding based on our supplemental and concentration grant funding, just 14.5 million. So you add all 3 of those up, and our total funding is $20,475,000. So these funds need to be spent on 4 general categories: student learning support, extended instructional time for students, additional core academic support, and integrated services that support teaching and learning. In order to receive these funds, we have to apply for them and also put together the learning continuity and attendance plan that must be adopted by September 30th, what Ms. Hare talked about. And here's the interesting piece. Of that $20.4 million, we have to spend $19.7 million by December 30th of this year. And then 720,000 of that by September 30th, 2022. So right now, the requirement is December 30th, 2020 to spend 19.7 million. The reason for that is they come from different buckets from federal and state, and there's different requirements. So, and also on that, so we need to receive the goods and services by December 30th in order to spend those dollars. So we can't put in a PO in December for services or goods that we arrive in March. So we must receive them by December 30th in order to spend those dollars.
So what are we spending it on? Is this what we're buying supplies with for distance learning, or?
The learning continuity attendance plan will be addressing those.
Okay.
But yeah, so those different categories for distant learning, so technology, internet, things like that. But Rebecca and I have been in constant contact on getting budget codes set up in order to start spending these dollars, and they'll be addressed in the learning continuity and attendance plan.
So would these also be spent on supplies or what teachers need to teach their distance learning?
Sure. Let me jump in real quick, Brian, if I can. One of the things that's unique about these dollars is they're recently identified, but you can spend them starting March the 13th or March the 20th.
Okay.
So when you get them 4 months behind schedule, you have to work a little bit harder to identify your expenditures. But one of the ways we're trying to think about this, and Rebecca and Brian have really been working in the details with it. But one of the ways we're trying to think about this is, what have we done differently? How have we had to change our approach in order to address the impacts of COVID-19? So there are lots of ways we started doing that right away. One of the ways we will be spending those dollars is by identifying all those ways we had to reposition the district right away to maintain teaching and learning once we went to remote. Yes, we can buy supplies for distance learning. We have purchased a lot of supplies for distance learning and deploying them as part of the launch. So, I mean, obviously you can make an easy connection between those kinds of activities and things we've had to do differently in this COVID-19 environment. But that's the way that we're going to work to spend all of these dollars before December 30, is to look back and say, so what did we do back then that was significantly different in its approach and use than we had planned when we started the year.
Okay. So who approves this pot of money? Do principals have a pot of money, or does it come through Rebecca?
So if I could jump in. So the pot of money, it's really divided into 12 areas.
Okay.
All the different areas, some are in for sanitation, some are for food service, technology, mental health, expanded learning. And so all of those, we're looking at a needs assessment of how things have changed and what we need to do to really provide students with quality education through distance learning. So when all of the departments have done a needs assessment, and then we're looking at what those needs are and then planning accordingly. All of this is in alignment with the learning continuity and attendance plan. If you think of the LCAP and all the actions and services within the LCAP, all of the questions and areas of the learning continuity plan align with the 12 areas within this budget.
Okay, I understand that. I'm just wondering if we're just starting out, and if there's a need for teachers to have certain materials, they may not know that yet. Is it too late to spend it, or how does that process?
I'm going to interrupt a minute. Again, it's about the plan. It's not about the spending.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the plan. These are the elements we have in place. It's not to just divide the money up. It's what's the coherence of that plan. There are things that we did that nobody anticipated for school, things that we did for summer school, materials that went out.
So that was in this budget.
Yeah, and like Matt said, it can go back to March. So
Right, I heard that, yeah.
Mitigation funding. What are the things that happened that were unanticipated? The rest of our funds, the rest of the budget development process is already in place. So allocations to school in the traditional way have been made. Right? How we're doing, the way we spend it is entirely different this year.
Okay.
So how are you not going to get on a bus?
Yeah.
It's in the future. So it's really focused. And so when you see the guidelines for the plan, Vita, it'll become a little more clear.
Okay, thank you.
In the Friday update, I'll send a link to that new template. Just so you, and again, Brian and Rebecca have been doing the working around this this new design nonstop for the last 2 weeks, trying to get because again, Brian's point is here's this learning loss mitigation fund. Tell us how you're going to spend it before December.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get. I'm trying to get my head around.
It's got to be a shift in our thinking. Oh, this is new money. No, it's not really new money. We're in a new environment.
Yeah.
What were the effects of that environment that these funds can be applied to mitigate, those other elements? Yeah.
So, Matt, funds we were supposed to get when? 4 months ago is what I think Brian said, or these are just funds that are being allocated now?
So we actually haven't received the funds yet.
Oh, okay,
We can allocate expenditures from March 1st
okay.
to
So-
December 30th.
Okay, so that 19 million will go back all the way to March, and they'll be able to allocate it because at the time there was, I got it.
Fill up the hole.
Okay, thank you.
We learned about the availability of funds from federal relief some time ago, but it took a long time for the machinery to grind out exactly how those dollars were going to come to school districts. The governor had a plan in May that we kind of measured and thought, hey, it could look like that. By the time the state legislature got a hold of it, it looked very differently. Now that we have an idea of how it's going to be sized and shaped and some of the guidelines for here's how you can address these funds, how you can use these funds to address, as Luke was saying, this COVID environment, now we can really be tangible about drawing connections between how we need to do our work and resource that's provided to make it possible.
Gotcha, thank you. Okay, that's what I was concerned about.
So Mr. Ontiveros, what you're saying is that when we get when we do the next meeting, then we'll understand better what mechanisms are in place for the input from teachers ongoing, as opposed to what was done, what we're looking at retroactively that might have happened already to mitigate the circumstances of COVID.
Yeah, because to your point that you made previously, we're still running all the normal processes.
Yeah.
Inside council, school planning processes.
Right.
This doesn't eliminate.
Of course.
This is outside of that. I say normal.
Yeah, it's a lot of air quotes lately. Tired. Yeah. And Matt and Brian, this CARES money we know is at some point going to come or is allocated. It seems like that's in the news. There's still discussion on how this is tying this to other things. Why am I so? Yeah.
Sounds funny.
Yeah, I was double. Yeah. Did you understand any of that, Matt or Brian?
No, can you repeat it?
Okay. The CARES money we're talking about federal. I know that there's state guidance, but we're talking about federal monies. And when you read the news right now, some of the CARES money is being tied to other things. Is this stuff something that we already have been allocated or we know is coming for sure?
Well, we did have to do an initial application for the funds. We've relied on school services to give us an estimate, and then initially, and then later on, the CDE came out and said, "Here's if you apply for the funds, here's your allocation." And so we got these numbers from the CDE 3 weeks ago.
So John, I think you may be referring to the president's executive order. He made a recommendation that states use their CARES funding to augment the reduction in unemployment. That's not attached to this. This was the allocation specifically for schools.
Yeah. So this is already a done deal. It's not tied to anything. That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Correct. All right, so I'll move on to the next slide. So we had an increase in our revenue, and so now we do have an increase in our expenditures. So since our supplemental and concentration grant dollars increased on the revenue side of 2.9, then we're putting in an additional 2.9 on the expenditure side. And then we are budgeting all of the learning loss mitigation dollars, the $20.4 million. We had the increase in the ACEs of 339,000, so increase on the expenditure side of 339, along with the preschool. And then we are restoring the COP payments to the general fund. So we did move budget adoption, we moved them out, and now we're moving them back in. So that's an increase of $3.4 million. So at the last board meeting for adoption, we had this slide, so we wanted to bring it back of projected budget cuts for 2021. So we lined out 2 items on there. The COP payments were moved back into the general fund of 3.4 million, and then the supplemental concentration grant dollars, the 4.3. That was the cut to supplemental and concentration grant dollars we thought we'd have, but there wasn't a cut. There's actually an increase, so that goes away. What we're keeping in the budget is the transfer from the general fund to Fund 14, the deferred maintenance fund of 654,000. Currently, we're keeping the 10% cut to the site and SUSA departments. Also, the growth fund and equipment replacements, we're keeping that in because we have found out we actually don't need that in our budget for this year. Our routine restricted maintenance contribution decrease of 263,000. That stays because the state told us a different way on how to calculate it. And also we still have that PERS and STIRS relief that the state contributed to CalPERS and CalSTIRS on behalf of the districts to lower our PERS and STIRS rates. So that stays in there. So when you look at it all on one slide and pull it together, this is what it looks like. So our original budget adoption on the revenue line A5 at adoption is 213.3 million. Now at the 45-day budget revision mark, revenue is 249.6. So an increase of $36.3 million. It's a big increase. Line A1 LCFF 14.5 million. I talked about that. Federal revenue 18.9 million. That's the learning loss mitigation funds. Other state revenue increased 1.7 million. That's the learning loss mitigation funds along with ACEs. And then the other local revenue increasing by almost 1.1 million. That's the special ed additional dollars we're receiving. Going down to the expenditure side, our expenditures are increasing by 23.7 million. And that goes back to this 2 slides ago, what I mentioned for our expenditures. So it was supplemental and concentration grant dollars increasing by 2.9, learning loss mitigation 2.4 million, and ACEs. Then down below in part D transfers out. That's the putting the COP payments back into the general fund. So increase of 3.4. So the bottom line at our budget adoption, we had deficit spending of 16.9 million. Now at the 45-day budget revision mark, we're deficit spending 7.7 million. So it's a trend in the right direction. So that's a change of over $9 million overall. So for at the 45-day budget revision, we have an ending fund balance of about 46 million. That represents 15.3% ending fund balance. But wait, and now we need to go to deferrals. With the ending fund balance of $46 million, we actually have deferrals in 2021 of $36.6 million. And this was calculated with information we know now and a couple assumptions that we had to make. So to look at the graph and to read it, at the top it says deferred from. So deferred from February, if you go down, where the revenue we should receive in February of $3.6 million is going to be deferred, and we're going to get paid that in November. So in March, we have 7.4 million deferred. We'll receive that in October. And then April, the 7.4 we'll receive in September. And then our May deferral we'll receive in August. And then the $10.6 million deferral from June we'll receive in July. So you add all those up for the year and estimated deferrals of $36.6 million.
So just to summarize for the untrained business mind, that's $36 million that we should receive in the 2021 year that won't be received until 21-22.
Correct. So with that, what to watch for, what's going to happen with the economy. AB 1835 is still out there, and the legislature is still reviewing that. We have our unaudited actuals due September 15th, and our first interim report will be back in December with that. So with that, we can answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Matt, got my questions answered, so great
Thank you,
job.
guys.
Stay safe.
All right, the board will acknowledge the review of impact of the 2020-2021 state budget on the district's adopted budget as presented in item 8A. All right. That ends discussion. Anybody have any board superintendent reports? Anybody have anything to? No?
Well, I've just enjoyed all the Zooming we've been doing.
Yeah.
Preschool. Got to Zoom a kindergarten. Tonight. I'm junior high.
Does the lens and the computer stay pretty clean for preschool and stuff like that?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, fingerprints, getting my clothes, stuff like that.
I know.
I just want to say, I want to welcome everybody back. This is going to be an interesting and challenging school year, not just for our district, but for everybody's. And I think everybody just supporting one another and, you know, me being straightforward, there's no reason to, you know, there's going to be mishaps, but you know what? It's a learning curve for everybody. It's new. It's okay. I think we're going to get through it. And as time goes on, it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. You know, I know parents and the teachers and everybody, you know, there's going to be some hiccups, but you know, what? But I don't think there'll be an issue. We'll be all right.
Pick up and move on.
We're here to support everybody. So it'll be a great year.
Yep. Everything new is different. Everything different is new. And I'm gonna, since I did WKRP last week, I'm gonna start just doing like a quote of the week. This week is gonna be Monty Python. And now for something completely different. Mr. Ontiveros.
Oh my God. I just want to comment on some things that transpired. Because once again, I forgot to unmute myself. There's the new quote. You know, even though this is new, there are some traditional things that we have done in new ways. Last Friday, we had our new teacher orientation, 63 new teachers, all via Zoom. Kudos to Jennifer Loftus, Director of Teaching and Learning, and especially Shelley Hart, who's our new teacher development and support TOSA. That's a new role for Shelley. She's not new to the TOSA team, but that's a new focus, and did a great job getting all those folks connected over Zoom. And it kind of mirrored what the start of school is going to look like. I mentioned to folks that this is tomorrow is my 35th first day of school as an educator, and it's unlike any other. And the entire year is going to be different. And the thing I want to say is it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And so we do need folks just to be patient. I'm so proud of everyone, how adaptable, because I think you mentioned that, John, at the last meeting when we talked about the reentry plan. They've been adaptable and flexible, right? And we've got to, that's got to be our backbone going into this year. You know, the reopening guideline that the state sent out was called Stronger Together. And we're stronger together. And we got to focus on what are the things we all need to do together. And that's going to mean that, you know, we're going to have to alter ways that we've done things in the past, because this year is different and it will be different. And I'm going to make a bold statement here. it's likely never to go back to the way it was back in March of 2020. Not for the foreseeable future anyway. And I think we're going to be better and stronger as a result. And so Rebecca mentioned many times in her presentation tonight, Dr. Tammy Castillo-Schiffer, who's just done a phenomenal job of outreach to parents and community. We've had a team of community liaisons that has been, extending themselves to doing online registration. We had a week ago, last Monday, I think Mrs. Cordero asked me about how many kindergartners do we have enrolled. And a week ago, this past Monday, we were at about 1,200, which is about 650 off of what our projection was. As of yesterday, we had 1,874 kindergartners enrolled digitally, online, right? Not the way that we've always done things where we gave people packets, but adaptability. Our families are committed to their kids being in school, committed to that powerful experience. We provided the support, they figured it out. So, every challenge opens a door to opportunity, and we're stepping through this door of opportunity, and we're going to make this work because we're stronger together. So kudos to Matt and Brian and his team and Bijou and all the hiring that happened in spite of not being able to recruit face-to-face. Melissa and the whole instructional service team putting together a reentry plan, connecting with folks. We cannot do things the way we've done them in the past. It's just not possible anymore. So how do we do it? Better, smarter, stronger together. And that's got to be our focus moving forward. We will make this work. We owe it to our kids. The PD, those kindergartners, this is going to be their kindergarten year. We got to make sure it's been just like for every other class, back to when Hector was a pup, that we're giving them the best stuff. And I have full confidence in our folks that we're going to be able to work this out, because there's no expertise in how you start a public school district in distance learning. Every district across the county, the state, the country, and the world is figuring this out. And we've got just as much ability as anybody else to figure it out. But I know our folks here, and I have full confidence that we will. And we will come through this stronger together. And so, tomorrow's the first day of school, first day of the school year. And I always said my favorite thing about the first day of school has always been new shoes and haircuts. So that's something that we're not going to see tomorrow, new shoes and haircuts, but it doesn't mean that opportunity is any less important or vital to our kids in the future. So I just commend all of our folks that have shouldered together to make this doable, because we can and we will do it stronger together. That's all I got.
Put it past those kindergartners to show you their shoes, though. All right. We are adjourned until next time.